Essential to being prepared for an MS Global Assessor's visit is the understanding of your business, your organization, your operation in terms of its business processes. The sequential step-by-step activities that are routinely undertaken to deliver your business, your service or produce your product. Now, I'm going to use, to illustrate this, the example of an airport taxi company, purely made up. And before I go any further, I'm going to group my business activities into two main groupings. That's the main core deliverable, the main business process, and supporting business activities, supporting processes. These are the activities, the back office activities, that without being done effectively, we'd have difficulty in delivering our main business client-facing activity. Okay, so I've made up a few examples of processes that we could imagine are contained in the main core activity. So an airport taxi company, somebody's going to want a move from their home to an airport. We're going to get an inquiry. It might be a phone call, it might be an email, it could just be a word of mouth conversation that expresses a requirement. And this stage of this process I'm going to call the inquiries process. Inquiry. The inquiry is going to draw information from the prospective customer, understanding those details that will allow us to support them and provide them with their service. When that information is drawn, it can be passed to the next process in our activity here, and that's the planning of the service. Now, planning of this service is planning this one individual move, this one particular customer. And this is taking the information that's been drawn in the inquiry step and deciding how it's going to be done. What driver is going to be used? What vehicle is going to be used? What time should they be set off from their home location so they can get to the customer pickup location at the right time? What route are they going to use? And there's quite a lot when you think about the detail that can be put in here in this activity. The next process that I'm inventing here or using here is the dispatch process. Dispatch. Now, I'm using this term, but basically what I'm getting to here, I could call it something. I could call it the release process. I could call it the tasking process. I could give it all forms and names. It doesn't really matter so much as what it is actually being done. The planning of the service is all well and good. It might well be a fantastic plan, but unless that's communicated to the driver who needs to actually realise that plan, we're not actually getting anywhere. So the dispatch process or the tasking process is saying to the particular individual, you've got a trip from here to here. That can be communicated via email, again via word of mouth, or on the telephone. There's a whole host of internal communication methods that can be used to flow that information to the person who matters, who needs it. The next step we've got here that I'm using is the pickup. So the pickup, again, we might have a way we want all our drivers, all our chauffeurs to undertake a pickup. It might be that we want them to go outside someone's home and honk on the horn. Or that might not be our style as a business. And we want our chauffeurs to go to the door, knock, introduce themselves politely and assist in the carrying the baggage from the home and maybe potentially give a briefing on the route that's been chosen, the air conditioning systems in the vehicle. You can imagine. The pickup process is itself another activity that we can understand, if done well, is going to be a benefit. Then we've got the transit, the route. I'm going to call it the route, the transit. Again, the name isn't essential as much as understanding what it is that's being done. But this is actually moving the vehicle to the destination. Next step, sequential process, is the drop-off. And this is arriving at the destination and departing with the customer satisfied, arrived at the airport in time for their flight. The next main business activity that we cannot forget, because we are a business after all, is the bill. Billing the customer. We could call this invoicing, we could call this the finance process. Again, it doesn't matter. But what we can see here is the step-by-step processes in the main business activity. These can be broken down a lot smaller, but that doesn't always benefit. To understand them relative to the architect or the owner of each of these is quite useful. So relative to these, I'm now going to look at who in my organization really owns these processes. A small business, it might be the one individual who owns them all. But in a large organization, it might be particular people that are the specialists for each of these particular activities. And they can be called the process owner. So the inquiries process could be John. The planning of the service, that might be Mark. And so on. By identifying the process owner, we know who is really in charge of that activity, who actually designs and adjusts it and improves it if needed. I'm now going to switch to looking at the supporting processes. So we're looking at an airport taxi company here. And before we even get the business in motion, or routinely or periodically while in business, we might need to take a step back from this operational level activity and think a bit strategically about our business. So a supporting process that I'm going to add here is the business planning process. Also, we're using vehicles. So it might be a worthy understanding to realize that we actually have to have a maintenance process. Potentially, if we are supplying vehicles, then we're going to have a purchase process. If we are selecting drivers that are safe, have the professional, polished and presentability that we want for our operation, then we're going to have a recruitment process. Now, I can go on. This are by no means exhaustive lists, and they can be broken down again into selection process, a vetting process. However, it needs to make sense on how far that's broken down. And if you do think about who actually owns that process, that can help to understand the level of detail that makes sense. But understanding your business, your operation, your delivery in terms of the sequential steps that are undertaken is an essential